I think on that note, we'll get started. My clock reads a little after 6 p.m. here in Puerto Rico, where about 45% of clients are still out of power. About 200,000 just lost power again after having gotten it back. And I'm joined, as always, I'm Sam Tallman. I'm Director of Energy Services for Green Power Technologies Puerto Rico and co-principal here at the Puerto Rico Energy Forum and member of the board at Fundación Borincana. I'm joined by my uh, regular conversation partner and managing director, founding director of Fundación Borincana, Tom King.
Hey guys, I'm glad. I know it's Thursday before Easter. I almost didn't get back to my apartment because of all of the processions that were going on in Fuengirola and Mijas, etc. But I did get back, and I'm here
Only to
to
be removed from the call.
only to be removed from the call. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, it's occupational hazard, I guess.
We are
We'll
joined.
have to have a private word with Javier.
Yeah, that's good talk. Well, that's going to be in Javier's permanent file. Um,
I noticed a lot of folks. I mean, there are a lot of robots, right? That you were deleting. I was seeing the list before I too was deleted.
a casualty of the AI revolution.
Yeah. Well,
In
they're all members. They can all watch this. So, members out there, you don't have to record this stuff. We do this and we put it up and we give you the link.
and we recognize that not everybody can be here in person, but
That's right.
we are joined in person, virtually in person, by our guest tonight, Adiel Morales, branch manager of the Puerto Rico division for 2G Energy North America. Adiel, who's joining us from Dallas. So
There you go.
you're
Yeah.
avoiding all
Yeah,
the
excellent timing from my part, right? It's just take this week to just out being out in Dallas, where all this is happening on the island. I cannot say.
Yeah.
Maybe I see the future. I'll just say that for now.
See if
so
you let us know in the chat whether you're joining us from Florida or Puerto Rico.
Adiel, I want to dive into, the inner section of the work that you do and the outage that we're experiencing here in Puerto Rico right now, which is, um, as we've talked about before, about 48% of the Puerto Rico's economy is made up of industrial manufacturers. Another 30% or so are service providers, whether it's lawyers and accountants or energy solution providers, engineering services, et cetera, that you know enable the other 47, nearly 50% to be successful. And so it is outsized importance for the island, and almost all of them that I know of have some form of redundancy, whether that's using on-site power as their primary source and using the grid as backup, or having the grid and having a diesel generator as a backup, or in many cases, and we're going to talk about Medtronic here in a moment, there are multiple layers of redundancy, including a UPS, including batteries, including solar, including cogen, including the grid. When your customers uh, experience an outage like the island-wide blackout that just took place starting last night on April 16th, what's the process they go through? Walk us through a little bit of how they interact with the grid and that system, and what your role is.
Depends on our customers. So we have customers where they decided to go with a little bit higher on investment and cover the resiliency part, ensuring that whenever an event like this happens, it is automatic transition from just being connected to the grid tied. They're all grid tied. We don't have any completely islanded operations. They're all grid tied, but some of them went a little bit above. And one of the hotels in the West Coast, this events happen. They they just run with our units, and it's like nothing happened. Everybody in that hotel did not find out that there was an outage on the island. Then we have customers that did not opt for that level of resiliency for automatic transfer to island mode and decided to manual transfer. So they developed internal secrets of operations and established a protocol with us as far as, okay, so we went down, we have our diesels, we're having like our critical loads, and now let's bring back the cogeneration plant and let's start bringing, we got to go by step loads. It's a process. If we have done this repeatedly and training enough with their team, in less than 2 hours, they can have their operations up and running with that type. Some of them, and this actually happens, they just look at the projects initially for the cogeneration from our solutions as far as just in the cost basis. They did not consider resiliency. So we're grid tied. This events happen, but we can't run because we don't have the provisions electrically interconnected to be able to do black start and start running their site in island mode. They don't have the sequence of operations to manually start bringing back their systems and go back into operation. What we tend to run into, it's this events happen, and guess how many calls I got to actually implement island mode automatically into all of those sites. And so it's almost a shame that a lot of people they don't tend to value that resiliency until these events happen, and now there's a need for it. And we try to support as much as we can, but one of them, the system was ready, it could work, but they never wanted to stop operations for us to test this, and wanted us to test this right now on the fly. And there's some safety parameters, and this goes like just safety on their side, safety on personnel, and safety on our equipment, that we have to go through those safety checks to make sure that we don't run into a situation where nobody looked at an event, they expected a fail-safe to work, and because it was not tested, then you have an island-wide outage. We cannot afford that.
Do you anticipate, the reports I've seen, and I think people's experience, this like compounds every time there's an outage, or every time they have to switch equipment, or every time they have to give you a call to say, okay, are we up and running? Are we good to go? Do you anticipate more and more island, truly islanded systems?
Yes, that's where most of what every latest project that we're involved in, be it that already in moving in production or in development, contemplates that resiliency factor of being able to automatically island and just run, just have the grid tie be the last point of resiliency. Pretty much everything else comes first: solar, battery, CHP. That's yeah, every single project we currently have actually does contemplate that. So the newer ones.
And can you give us an idea of, across, well, I guess on two levels. One is the projects at 2G. 2G is a global company. Across the units you guys have operating around the world, and then on the Puerto Rico level, how many of them are owned by the end user, or have a partner for the financing and development of the projects?
That is a heavy question by region. So as you mentioned, like out context, obviously for people, 2G, a global corporate based out of Germany, publicly listed. We have 13 subsidiaries all over the world. We're closely tied up in Puerto Rico, this business unit with North America and Canada. And we have over 9,000 installations. So what percentage of that it's owned by the off-taker? Just like I bought it, I installed my unit, it's mine, I own it. I'll have to get back to you. If I have to go by a feel, I will say, as far as like outside of Puerto Rico and the Caribbean, it tends to be more a third party that does the installation and the financing. That they don't I will say very few just buy direct. It's like, okay, like how I put it, and X pharmaceutical, I'm just gonna buy it and just have this asset on my sheet. They don't want to carry that risk, so they prefer somebody else carrying that risk for them.
And in
But
terms of sorry, go ahead.
no, I would say, but obviously you do see cases where they do buy it and they do own the asset, so that does happen. But I don't think it's as common as having a third party on it.
And in terms of the trajectory of that proportionality, do you anticipate that to be the same, or more and more units, or more and more customers saying, given the fact that I want more redundancy, more resiliency, more just security around my energy provision, I'm going to either leverage in-house expertise and just do it myself, or expand to have that in-house expertise? Or is it maybe the inverse, that they're saying, I know I'm better at making X pharmaceutical product, and I need to have a partner in management of this asset?
You're absolutely correct. Like the what we're seeing more and more is people looking, they just want energy as a service. I am great manufacturing X or Y. I am great at running the supply or warehouse and logistics. I just want energy. Charge me a rate. I'm used to Luma. I'm used to seeing a bill at the end of the month. I like that. I don't have to worry about it, and I have guarantees in place to make sure you perform. So they de-risk to some extent. So again, or every other project in the career where I'm involved currently, it has that model.
Yeah. It's, I mean, we're, I'm not sure about pharmaceuticals, right? But when you get into highly industrialized, highly manufactured, process-oriented, oil refineries, other types of chemical facilities, it's much, much harder to have energy as a service, right? I mean, in particular, you'd mentioned before we started here about getting something together and getting going for somebody, but just to turn it on, get it going, all you needed them to do was to stop their operations, right? It was for a period of time, and then you could test and hook up and get everything going, and then your guarantee would kick in and everything else, and they just wouldn't come to that stopping point. And it's that kind of interfering with operations, the kind of the push me pull you. Do you have a sense for whether this is, and what you described is actually a fairly minor issue. It's like finding it that it doesn't affect the overall process of design and integration and data collection, which in a much more complicated industrial thing, their engineers don't want you to touch it. But what's your sense based on what you've done in Puerto Rico and looked at about the pharmaceuticals in the industry? Is that an issue that we're likely to come up against in terms of developing and designing these systems, or is it more we can design it, you guys just have to be aware and find a time to turn it off so we can test it or something like that?
It's I think by experience, and it's been like that. They will like to this include this in design, incorporate it, it's ready for it. But when it comes to the time of the commissioning portion of it, that's when we run into it. It's easy to commission our system, isolate it, and then commission tied, and you're ready to run. It's way more complex to commission an islanded portion of it.
Yeah.
It is very driven by who on the other end you're dealing with, and meaning from the customer side. If they understand the value of ensuring this system is ready, you can get the space to do it. But a lot of people, and actually something I saw in this conference, and it made me think, because I always talk about this when it comes to like the customers, is if there was an easy way for them to envision or see by industry, a little cheat sheet of like pharmaceuticals, restaurants, hospitals, X. 1 hour of downtime, what does it cost you? 8 hours of downtime, what does it cost you? 1 day, 1 week. A lot of these decisions will, to be able to commission this system, will probably be a moot conversation, because they could understand that, oh, I do have to stop my production and maybe report to production global that I am not going to make X amount of money for testing. But if I can tell them that, hey, based on the weekly load shedding events that we have, and every 6 months of risk of going down for the day or three, yeah, doing this test right now could save us, this potential loss of revenue. And so I
Yeah.
wish we would definitely run into a lot more of do all your testing you need to ensure we will have forever run, but we tend to run more, even if it's designed for that, to not be able to test that during the commissioning process. very sadly.
Yeah, it's cost avoidance, and this I think is super relevant for the Puerto Rico examples because they're highly regulated industry, and so if you're the FDA is a resident authority in Puerto Rico, which means it can knock on your door
Mm-hmm.
and you can't refuse its entry. And so if it needs to make sure that you have GMP, practices in place, your clean room is sterilized appropriately, your machinery is properly managed, and all of that comes back to the electrical side of things, which is if it's not getting up to the appropriate temperature, if it's not mixing the chemicals for the appropriate amount of time, if it's not actually being able to have the most consistent production of the product at the end of the day, then they'll shut you down, right? And so whatever costs are associated with having to power up front are paled in comparison to not doing it at the end of the day and being basically saying we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this facility and we're not the regulator won't allow us to operate, or our shareholders are basically saying, yeah, you guys are not providing the value to us in the way they should. What when you look across your portfolio of projects on the island, what percentage of the power needs are you guys meeting of your customers? I mean, or when they hit the transfer switch and disconnect from the grid in a moment of outage, what percentage of their processes do they need to turn off as non-essential?
It depends by site. It really depends by site. For most of it, like typically just in the essence of how we operate it, we at least for the engines, we need to bring them down to like 80% rated capacity to ensure we have a reserve for frequency control. So that kind of comes into the already contemplated on the design phase, but it depends on the customer. Sometimes they just want to be able to, I want to run my whole site and just have everything. That in the hotel that I'm talking about on the west side, that's it. That's what they have. All their facilities are able to run. They don't have to turn anything off. One of our sites in Jamaica, it's okay, so this side of the production, we're gonna disconnect and open when the grid is out, and we're gonna keep all of this other side of production. So we cover about, say, 70% of what they typically run if they were going to, their peak production. And so it comes down to how they decide to design it. If they just want to cover the critical loads and just have the clean rooms be able to maintain condition, and we're just going to keep that, it will be like, okay, so only 30% of your consumption. If you want to bring into production lines, okay, at that point we're covering 60%, but it really does come in the initial design, but how much they want to consider that risk. And as far as coverage, it depends by customer.
So shifting gears a little bit, and we're joined tonight also by Dave Robow from the Gulf Coast Energy Network, and Dave moderated a panel I was on last week about building community resiliency, particularly related to energy, and I was joined on that panel by former Secretary of Economic Development Manuel Aboy and Ricardo del Rosario from Texel and John Colliston. And I sort of took a contrarian position of we don't have any community resiliency in Puerto Rico. We've got a whole bunch of really good solutions for individuals, whether that's on the residential side or the industrial side. And then we've got a bunch of challenges at the macro side with regards to the grid, the generation units, the leveraging of federal dollars, leveraging of FEMA, et cetera. Cogeneration off island is Canada and US and Europe is used in district heating type scenarios. What are the opportunities for a district heating type project, or in Puerto Rico, district cooling project for Puerto Rico? How do we leverage a cogeneration at a scale that is more than just individual, but maybe on a regional microgrid or industrial park level microgrid that up to right now we don't have any examples like
the dream, Sam. That's the dream. That's the in Germany. That's the actually where 2G heavily involved is in that just thermal energy for district region. So that's a lot of installations in Germany that work just like that. The opportunity here, it it, there is some. I remember that's no one came out for this, but I know a project that was being looked at in that por la Milla de Oro that was gonna contemplate just having energy just for that whole sector, both electrical and thermal. It's, stuff like that can definitely be replicated, but there's not a limitation on the technology or the design or the know-how or it's just how do we go about, and this is a topic we definitely have touched in as far as in the microgrids when it comes from when you stop one customer behind the meter and you start going into a community and supply. It's what avenue will 2G have in place to come up with a solution to develop all of this when I have no roadway to implement it. But there is potential in various regions to do this, and we have
Well, I
done it
mean,
in Europe. But
you're also crossing over differences in regulatory thresholds and compliance, right? The obligations toward a private, sophisticated client who's contracting you for the energy versus the regulation and rights expected of residential customers, others, managing that grid, crossing rights of way. I mean, the
it's a
number
whole
of
yeah.
potential issues become yeah, legend.
Well, and this is where it requires
Yep.
some creativity. Is that my understanding is that in district heating implementation, everywhere else it's done, it is mostly driven by the utility that says, I want to have a competitive energy district here, and this is the best way to do meet thermal energy needs in particular, right? And here it could not be driven by the utility. But all of the challenges, Tom, you just laid out in terms of rights of way, regulatory hurdles, et cetera, would be facilitated by that driver. That's just not the case here, right? So it would have to be something that is independent and this is where Mia de Oro would be a challenge, right? Because it's if you have an industrial park, all of a sudden maybe it makes sense, right? Because all of that's Pridco's land, all of that is all those are Pridco buildings, all that's Pridco infrastructure.
Yep.
But at the level we see in Mannheim, for instance, like, it's, it doesn't look like that here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, if you're crossing over to operating the grid and providing resiliency concerns to people beyond the boundaries of, I guess, an infrastructure that you control, then yeah, you probably lose some of the resiliency factor. You could potentially do virtual supply effectively, sort of like wheeling, right? You could have a an energy supply contract, a backup energy supply contract, but it would all have to touch on the grid, right? It would all have to go through Luma, contractually, et cetera. You'd have backup. You'd have to be, there are ways to do that to create additional energy at a location. And now you're beginning to look like community solar, right? Community energy type things in terms of way that they're set up elsewhere. Yeah, you can potentially go a little bit farther, and things that we're looking and exploring, microgrids and the microgrid efforts that we're making. We're looking for definitions of that, right? Ways that you could provide energy and provide different metering and billing and even small amounts of reserve capacity within residential locations like apartments, right, where they don't have the capability of hosting their own energy system, but you could provide them with alternatives and with other means to access market competitive power and higher levels of resiliency.
And that's
But
something that
yeah,
in Germany, 2G one of our clients is a utility.
Yeah. Yeah.
In Jamaica, the utility it's seeing a lot of existing and new customers just have
Mhm.
on-site generation and disconnect because the price and stability sounds familiar. Uh, but they decided, you know what, we don't want to lose these customers. We want to put a what the hell, pass through instead of a PPA, pass through agreement. It's like I'm gonna own that asset and generation. I'm gonna keep you tied into the grid. I'm gonna give you your microgrid. You get your power, energy, thermal, but it's I'm just gonna charge you. It becomes more competitive. So, but utility is still in the game and it doesn't walk out, and they're supporting basically their own stability because and specifically in Jamaica, some regions are,
Right.
I mean, frequency fluctuations are are rough, very rough, and it is a solution that it's available. But as as far as in Puerto Rico, I haven't felt the openness from the utility to
Uh,
hey, come on private
They,
sector, like
yeah,
let's
and I
work
think
together.
part of,
they
I think a
they
lot of
haven't
that
had
has to
time to
do with,
think about it.
well, and I,
Well,
this
right.
goes back to
Yeah.
the base of everything that, Tom, you and I talk about often is the bankruptcy, right? So
Yeah.
PREPA, I don't think that PREPA would be disinterested. I think they're very, very conscientious of not losing, not having defectors, right? And uh, the problem is they're also in no position to be able to say we'll be your customer, and so even if they were interested, they have no capacity and they've been neutered to actually go after and say, yeah, we're going to build and buy and develop new energy projects so that we can be the pass-through entity that makes sure that our customers don't go, they're going to have an on-site solution one way or another, right? So
Yeah.
they're either going to do it with us or they're going to do it without us, and if they're in bankruptcy, they're in no position to say we're going to be your partner for this. And it's one of the things that, government agencies in Puerto Rico have had a hard time with generally. That,
Yeah.
if you look at Pridco, for instance, just to go back to Puerto Rico Industrial Development Company, they're looking for tenants. When Honeywell says we're going to expand in Puerto Rico, we need a 65,000 square foot building. Pridco issues bonds through a FOF and government agencies. And they build that building with for Honeywell. They said we're going to be the asset. You're going to pay us rent, and that's going to pay it off over time. But we're going to basically make sure that you have access to market rate real estate, state of the art, white box, whatever it is that you need to be successful. The nice thing is those are a lot more sellable bonds, right? They're a lot more investable projects than when you have a bankrupt power utility that it was like, we're going to build more assets. Like, no, please don't. Nobody wants you to be in charge of more assets. In fact, and we're trending in the other direction, right?
Yeah. Well, and those are all going to come. I mean, you saw well, because you've been talking to the guys at Pridco, but they've come out of the closet and said, we've got all this roof space. We want to build power, and if you're going to build something for someone, Honeywell, et cetera, it's going to come with an energy system of some description.
Uh,
Um, you know,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
just mentioned that to the executive
Yeah.
director last week. They put out a video of a campaign called Plug and Roll, basically promoting their inventory of real estate assets for as a promotional effort. Right? We've got the facilities, and if we don't, we'll help build them for you, and we'll do them for you, and make sure that it's everything you need. I told them the one thing that's missing in that video is energy, and it's people are concerned about investing in Puerto Rico, in part because of real estate availability, but also in part of the value of that real estate, and that comes from the energy side. I want to ask you a little bit about other ways. So we talked about district heating or district cooling, a district cogen project. The inability in Puerto Rico to have an engaged utility to be the driving force in some of those projects or in all of those projects. Um, Wheeling has been talked about for a while on the island since I think 2012 is when the legislative enabling of wheeling happened. As of right now, there aren't wheeling cases that are up and running. we don't have a demand response program. There's a VPP pilot that's underway that looks a little bit like demand response, but not for an industrial user by any measure. What other ways can and then industrial users can't put excess power onto the grid for the ironic reason that they think it's deemed dirtier than you can only do that with unstable power. But as long as it's
Right.
clean, we can't do it with. The irony, of course, is that unstable power drives people to diesel generators, which is way dirtier than your projects are mostly in propane and natural gas.
I think that's
Correct.
likely to change, by the way, right? I mean, the whole thing about you can only wheel renewable power, right? That's the way it was set up. That's the way it was set up in the regulation. I don't. It may require legislation, but I bet you they get it passed based on everything else that's going on. If not, it really is just a change in policy, right? Which is people have been arguing for since the beginning in terms of being able to wheel power that isn't, pure renewables.
So
So
on that point, and going back to the sort of position I took on the panel that Dave moderated, how do we close the gap between a macro system that has a whole bunch of bottlenecks and individual systems where people can say, I know this, I know the right solution for me. And the more individualized solutions we have, the harder it is to resolve the macro level. And we're caught in this vicious cycle. How do industrial players bridge? How can they bridge that gap? How can we think about industrial users playing a role in bridging those two communities?
That is a question. Because none of, I mean, as far as I know, like most of the industrials, it's everybody is all for themselves. They all want their own side generation, and that is it. If there was the option for this industrial zone, and they're all come together and make a and for this, but whatever, they all come together and decide like, hey, we all are willing to invest and have our own little power plant to supply X zone, and it's all delimited. Again, it's just if the opportunity came, this is something that we have done. It's not new anywhere else. The technology, the installations, it's just a limitation of being able to do it. If somebody came to 2G tomorrow and said us, la zona industrial de Cataño, all of that, we just need 10 megawatts, we need 15 megawatts. We can definitely help provide the technology for all of this.
yeah,
And we
Somebody's going
can
to
run
ask.
it, we can
that's
monitor it. It is not obviously there's the financial models on the rest about them, but it's still not that complex. It's just a matter of arranging it so it actually makes sense and it's allowed.
yeah. I mean, but what if they come to you and they say we really need 500 kilowatts
And that's where it becomes an issue. So
because
if it's
that is
just
what
five,
they need, right? I
yeah,
mean,
and
it's
not actually, I will say it's an issue.
yeah,
It would have been. So typically, and this is just from experience of doing projects in most, it applies to most of the Caribbean, honestly. But once you start using LNG, and also like a cheaper cost of fuel compared to propane, the price and the cost to be able to add that infrastructure, that regasification skid, the comply with the NFPA 59A and everything that goes into it, it starts making the project less financially feasible. And it needs to pencil at the end of the day. It has to. So now, and actually this is a new development. I'll say new because it's been the past like 3 to 6 months. Propane needs to be the rule of thumb was if you had 1 megawatt of natural gas, that means to use 600 to 700 kW in propane, 30% derating. Now the newest technology with our gensets, it's 10%. So that 1 megawatt now it became 900 kW. So it starts making more
yeah,
sense to include propane into that conversation. And when it under 1 megawatt for those projects, the installation, I will forever and ever, whenever I'm driving from the north to the west and I go by Rio Hondo and look in that direction, I see an LPG tank just surrounded by a cyclone fence. I'm like, how easy that is. It's a simple cost. The propane has been the fuel for the islands for the longest of time, so very robust logistic supply. It's and the cost of installation, it's insignificant, well, about 1/5 when it comes to LNG. So it makes it pencil. So if it's nowadays, somebody comes and say 500, yeah, as long as the credit for everybody involved meets,
Yeah,
it's something that we can do.
yeah.
That's
Because
basically what you guys did at the Rincon Beach Resort, right? I mean,
Correct.
that is that project, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
So
and I
if
think
let's say that there was 3 or 4 hotels that hotel little association there, and they would say, hey, instead of do this, let's just have one 900 kW and just supply to all of us. Yeah, it's
That's
something that can be done.
That's exactly what's been done in Punta Cana, where you have, I don't know, a 300 megawatt or 400 megawatt cogen district for all the resorts, right there that, um, and talking to the folks that from the Rincon Beach Resorts, like
yeah,
they're replacing their washing machine more often than they want to because of frequency and voltage issues. So partly it's like if everyone goes on to TripAdvisor and says don't go there, our air was out and couldn't wash my clothes, or they couldn't wash my sheets, or I had a bottle of champagne in the fridge and it got warm because whatever, like there goes your business. So it goes into like a cost avoidance conversation again.
yeah. Yeah, I think I mean coming back to some of the resiliency issues and some of the stuff you were talking about community, whether this district heating, district cooling, district power, within areas, and the question about crossover, right, with industrial systems that Sam you had asked. So one of the lessons of the hurricanes, or the hurricanes, let's just put it the hurricanes, but power went out for months and months, and there were several groups that had power, whether it was through some existing microgrids, industrial microgrids, or backup generation through diesel, so that they would have continuity. But they didn't do any business, right? I mean, they ran the facilities, and people came to them and charged their phones and did some work and chilled their medication, etc. And that's fine, but it's difficult to step out beyond that, right? We talked about some groups wanting to overbuild and interconnect with their local communities, and that's noble, right? Providing some additional resiliency, and I think it can probably be done, but it's originally intended as a means of sustainability of operations, right? So the continuity of operations that you want to have by having your microgrid and your backups and everything. So Medtronics has a great system in there now, and they can run through almost anything. But what they don't have is they don't have a guarantee that every employee at home is going to be resilient, and so they're going to have access to power, and people and their loved ones are going to be safe, and that they're going to be able to get petrol and travel to the office to work. So, I mean, that's a crossover I don't think anybody has really successfully answered in relation to the industrial. And maybe maybe you go back to forming company towns. So when you build a new thing for Honeywell and you build a new building, you build a community alongside of it
Yeah,
effectively.
tackle the housing challenge as well.
Company town, right? I mean, you don't have to make it exclusively a company town, because I think the ideas of kind of warehousing people and clustering, it just sounds a little bit too much like
Bit
China's
dystopian.
Foxconn, right? It's like Foxconn Puerto Rico. So maybe not, but I mean, you get the idea, right? For the continuity to operation, you need to know that you've got your employees have power, their families are safe, and they can get to work. You obviously need to make sure that your supply lines and things like that, but where how you can answer those questions much easier. There are some bigger problems in Puerto Rico that aren't directly addressed. But
It's that
I don't know.
bridge portion.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything in 2G's experience that they've done? I'm guessing 9,000 installations. You guys would probably have an operation in China, right?
Actually, I don't think we have one in China. We have in Japan, Korea,
Right.
Dubai, you name it, but I don't think we have any installation in China.
Yeah, China has a lot of
I'll have to check that, but I
district heating
don't.
and other
Yeah,
operations, and a lot of them are actually, or a lot of domestic, but there were a lot of foreign European firms that built them there too. Yeah.
So I want to tap, following on the sort of the thought that Tom just had. And well, on one hand, I think the challenge with even the housing component of it or the workforce resiliency is who's the driver for that, right? And you still need somebody to basically say, we have the interest in doing this, and absent a centralized authority or utility that says, look, here's the strategic plan for the future on how we're going to make sure that industry is as competitive as possible here in Puerto Rico. You have
and,
you It looks like altruism almost, right? And I think CP put a question in the chat which pertains to this a little bit, which is reserving 20% of generation capacity exclusively for frequency control, or other reasons to reserve that much capacity. It's like, well, whatever the reserve is, they're going to figure out a way to use it themselves as opposed to put it onto the grid because, and Adiel, you mentioned this, their number one interest is how do you make sure that the operations continue?
and that's why I mentioned when Tom said like the bridge, because it's that bridge and that connection beyond it. Because when it's a single customer, it's so much easier. And even though we're looking right now into, can talk much of it, but into developing a product for a specific type of customer that has enough volume on the island to like, okay, yeah, it makes sense to get hundreds of this product. And we're again, the technology exists. We can put it in containerize, simplify it, and you get your specific tiny microgrid just made for you, and you can put it in all your sites. And we have three versions: 50 kW, 100 kW, 200 kW, and we implement depending on the size of your installations. We can. That's something that, again, it's frustrating from my side because it's, if there was a venue to access and implement such options, we are very willing to do it because it in Puerto Rico, a lot of these solutions cancel out. They make financial sense even before starting to go into the tax credits and grants and all of this. We can manage to even contemplate operations and services and still make sense. The only limitation for that, community portion of it, or development of houses, or it's what avenue and access we have. Let's say, well, Palmas has their own thing, but a private neighborhood. It's like, okay, now we want to feed this private neighborhood, and they're all residential. Okay, we can develop a product for that. We don't have it in house. We'll work with partners and bring them in and put it all into a solution that is compliant with UL, and obviously with everything we have to go with insurance or companies. So it can be done, and to some degrees and forms we have done it in other countries. So it's just a matter of tropicalize it. Like all of our products for the Caribbean have already been tropicalized. It's everything comes with 185 wind rating. Everything comes contemplating you get a lot of frost, so that it's all been made for you. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
So you're at Microgrid Knowledge's event conference in Dallas, Texas right now. One of the areas of optimism that I have is that I think Puerto Rico has a lot of this expertise. I would venture to say that we have more industrial microgrids per square mile or per capita, or whatever the metric you'd like to use, than probably anywhere else that 2G operates. And that is, when I look at the trend, a lot of folks on the U.S. mainland are looking at having on-site power already. It's gone beyond just hospitals and military bases, and particularly in the data center boom, they're looking at saying we're gonna have our power. And to Tom's point of going back to a factory town, like the industry is now getting into major power plant operations because they need that for the technological development that they're otherwise investing heavily in. Um, One of the challenges I see is so maybe Puerto Rico's ahead of the curve, and I want you to comment on that. And then maybe another challenge we might be facing is the projects I'm seeing in microgrids in the US, for instance, are like 600 megawatts.
Yeah.
Huge, massive projects. What does that mean for how companies like 2G look at the Puerto Rico market, where it's like, we'd love to do 50 to 350 kW, but one 600 megawatt data center project is like all the business we would otherwise do on the island. What does that mean for the energy service providers and the other service providers that are the 30% of the economy that complement the 50% that's manufacturing? There's a lot rolled into that question, but maybe you
Yeah,
can just
yeah.
reflect on that, given you're at a microgrid conference.
So the first answer is yes, as far as like for microgrids in Puerto Rico, I think every microgrid project that 2G has been involved has come through my hands because they're all have been for the Caribbean. Not we don't see a whole lot of that yet in Europe and in the US yet. But yes, we're starting to see that. We have our first, actually, I think next week we're commissioning that first microgrid in the US that we're involved in. And to the second portion around data centers and the yes, as 2G, we do have two current products that we're presenting for those customers to contemplate, but that is true that it deviates attention into obviously there's such a huge opportunity. But one of the things that and I don't see a concern on this portion because 2G, so 2G where it's located in Hague, Germany, it's a little town. That town is almost all 2G. Like the expansion of added buildings to be able to like output. One of the things that keep customers in the US coming to us is our lead times. When the situation in Ukraine happened, we were putting an incredible amount of engines out to head into the Ukraine for the Ukraine effort, and I did not suffer in the US and in Puerto Rico. We did not suffer any delays, even with that uptake on supplying. So yes, I'm pretty sure. Like if I think 2G corporate, they're gonna chase that golden goose, just like many of other suppliers out there. But I do not see it having an impact on what we're trying to do here as far as like, oh, we will not be able to support this. So far, the experience I have in this whole time is they're very willing to acclimate a product to the area. They're very willing to acclimate it and not just be weatherization and to some extent like make it tropical, but include the technology required for it. We're right now looking at to some specific solutions aside from that one I mentioned for a specific customer, but for this area to just simplify the integration of a microgrid, in an essence, just have it an easier plug and play because it's all going to come tested already from our factory, meaning just generation plus X plus Y. So that's something that we're currently in the engineering phase and development. So I really don't see a whole lot of this will not happen because of data centers.
Crowley has commissioned the first U.S. flagged LNG tanker, and they're
Using a loophole.
well, previously they were loading ISO containers onto their ship with other cargo and bringing it from the U.S.
Yep.
Because it was a U.S. flag tanker. Now they or a U.S. flag ship, and now it's a U.S. flag tanker. So they're compliant with Jones Act. It's the only one, right? They're going to dominate U.S. Natural gas. How does that affect you guys going after, or doing more natural gas projects, or talk to Crowley and say, look, now you guys need to fill that up with propane or have a designated propane or global markets coming in from Barbados or Trinidad or Jamaica, they're still going to be more cost effective for propane.
At least from my end, it's as I mentioned, like typically the projects once you are below is X amount of I call it a megawatt. But once you're below 1 megawatt, LNG doesn't start making that much sense. Because of so I our propane projects are gonna stay at that range from 50 or 80 kW to like 1 megawatt, and above 1 megawatt, that's when probably comes in. They are, I mean, know that they're involved in a lot of development for that size. So that's where they obviously can see the opportunity and are making investment on it. But I do not see us having to make a decision and that's it. We're gonna die by LNG or die by propane. We're just dividing the market based on the rated capacity required by the project.
We are coming up on our hour here, but Alia, we are planning a an insight event with you and 2G through the Puerto Rico Energy Forum at Medtronic's Microgrid on May 27th. Can you give just a teaser about what Medtronic's project looks like? And obviously, we're going to go into a lot more depth in person at the end of May, but what is it that we're going to have an opportunity to see there?
All right. So first, we're going to my favorite electronic product because we got four of them, and Juncos is my favorite side by far. This feels like home in my team's chat. That's my background is the Juncos side. I like it that much. As far as so in that specific side, so we got Electronic has the solar farm. So we'll have to walk a little bit just as a preview because we'll have to park there. So you're gonna park in the shade where they're generating power, and then eventually we're gonna go to where our power plant is located out there. That power plant we got 1.4 megawatts with 20,000 gallons for cryogenic LNG with regasification skid and absorption chiller to supply chill water on the return side. It's I'll let the rest as far as what is in there because I want you to feel the power and see the what footprint it takes to see how much energy we take out of that. And we're definitely gonna go into the engine room, by the way. So just get ready for it. Will get noisy.
Yeah, awesome. Adiel, thank you very much. I know that this is a hectic time with customers and you off island, and the outage that Puerto Rico is still facing. I just refreshed Luma's um, uh, emergency response dashboard, and the 57.6% clients with service number has not changed in the last hour. Um, I'm still without power, I know, so I can only imagine your customers are waiting by the phone
Oh,
to give you
yeah.
guys updates about how your operations are working across the island.
So
Um,
so so I'll jump in there real quick just because something happened while we were having this call. One of our sites went down. And one of the greatest things that I have, we have an amazing team on the island. And in less than 30 minutes, that site went back online. Because and I just saw a text from one of our team members, hey, just so you're not concerned, we already took care of it. I'm like, this helps. Definitely
it,
helps.
No, it totally does. And going back to, I guess we had already hit record, but our conversation before, maybe after I had removed Tom, but before he'd come back for the formal conversation is, Puerto Rico feels like it's in a precarious economic position, right? And so if the industry can't find the right solution for their operations, they have a really hard time being successful here on the island. And if they go, the cascading effect with regards to employment, with regards to economic production, with regards to the tax base, um, is enormous. So the fact that they can tap into on-site power solutions is a real boon to their existence, Puerto Rico's viability, and I think the island's competitiveness. We'll see what happens, right, with regards to tariffs and reshoring manufacturing and taxes globally, taxes in the U.S., access to global supplies and whatnot. But uh, without power, Puerto Rico is going to have a really tough time, and so we're seeing, at least right now, 42.4% of the folks suffering on this long holiday weekend without power. Glad your customers are still operating, I guess is the positive note. Let me
Yeah.
just make that the housekeeping note that Tom put in chat really quickly. We'll make sure we're sharing the link for the Medtronic visit and providing more detail. There are three parts of that visit. One is a tour of the facility and the microgrid, a panel with Adiel, the folks from Medtronic, and the folks that were involved in making that infrastructure project a reality. And we're also going to give an update from our microgrid working group. One of the initiatives that we have going through the Energy Forum is convening experts to discuss the hot topics, core challenges that are inadequately being resolved. And one of those is microgrid development. Adiel's on that, CP's on that. There's a number of other folks that are contributing their time and energy and their expertise to make sure that microgrids are easier to develop and successful projects are more easy to replicate. So we're going to hear an update from our microgrid working group, and then there's going to be a networking happy hour to close the afternoon. So numbers are limited, as Tom mentioned, to about 30. Membership tickets are $50. General tickets are $75. Members have a discount code in their inbox. If you don't have that in your inbox for whatever reason, but you can hear my voice, send us an email, send us a note, sam@prenergyforum.org or tom@prenergyforum.org, and we'll make sure that you get all the information you need. That's May 27th at Medtronic in Juncos. And yeah, I think it's going to be
Yeah.
one of these
Yeah.
really insightful on-site visits.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I'll miss it. I'll be back in Spain after some travels. But I'll also point out for those who are hearing this or seeing this on Monday the 21st, so Easter Monday. There is I don't know how to put it. It's kind of an overlay, not necessarily a subset of the microgrid group, which is the microgrid. What are you guys calling it, CP? Microgrid Approval Process Accelerator, MAPA. Oh yeah, I see what you're doing there. And we basically it's something that came out of PR Energy Week, and probably 60% of the members of the active members on that are also members here and working in the microgrid group. And there is a meeting for that on Monday, the 21st of May. If you are a member of the microgrid group here, or you want to be a member of the microgrid group, then you're a member of the forum. Join the group, and you can also join that effort. That effort's a little bit more focused, more directly at permitting, compliance, interconnection. But it all is necessary and all adds up.
Tom, we should not save our housekeeping for the end of the hour. Nobody is listening to our voices anymore at this point.
Oh, they love us. They know this is when it gets fun. So
It's
Yeah,
true. All right, Adiel, we'll leave it there. But thank you, sir, for joining us. Thanks for being a part of Power Hour and the Puerto Rico Energy Forum, and for 2G's support. Really looking
of
forward
course.
to our event together in May.
I agree. I'm really looking forward to it, and thank you. Thank you for the time. This is like I always mention and I will forever mention, this is a forum and a space that takes a holistic view of to how to best address a lot of our issues when it comes to energy on the island. So I'm highly appreciative of Tom and you for having this space.
Our
thanks.
pleasure.